Hi, my name is Zain Ishaq. I'm the CEO at dotCMS. We are launching a brand new series. We call it Real Talk, Real Trust by dotCMS. The aim of this series is to really go deeper into some of the concepts that we are now, as marketers, delving in with relates to AI and how that is obviously giving us newer challenges in terms of making sure that our messaging stays authentic, our brand remains consistent, and that we continue to build trust with our audience, which tends to be at the foundation of everything we do in marketing. So we have here Tom Wentworth, who is a CMO at Recorded Future currently. Previously, he has also served at previous organizations such as Acquia as CMO. We let Tom introduce himself in a short bit. And we also have Ryan Picchini, who is our Vice President of Go-to-Market and channels. With that, I'll hand over to you, Tom. Maybe tell us a little bit more about how you are currently thinking about this new wave of AI from a marketing perspective, and maybe also share a little bit more about your background.
Sure, Zane, and thanks for having me. So I'm Tom Wentworth. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Recorded Future. We are a cybersecurity company in the threat intelligence space. I have mixed emotions on AI, Zane, to be honest. I some days wake up scared to death of the future. I often wake up wondering, is it overhyped? I'm now, believe it or not, more in the overhyped category than I am scared of the future. So this should be a good conversation. But, AI is certainly a part of my everyday these days as CMO at Recorded Future. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some opportunity, there's some challenges. So we can talk about all those things today.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I think I'm pretty much in the same camp. It depends on the time of the day you ask that question. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself and also maybe say a bit more about why we are decided to launch the series?
Yeah, Ryan Picchini. I'm the head of go-to-market strategy and channels at dotCMS. I've been sort of in the marketing technology realm for a long, long time as both a marketer and a seller. And I think we are so excited to launch this series because there's so much ambiguity in the market. We've all kind of seen the power of AI in our personal lives. We've seen it come to fruition in specific use cases. And for marketers and business leaders, how do you harness the power of AI and how do you have a real discussion about it, as opposed to trying to do some research on your own, maybe having some conversation in a small forum. But this hopefully will get those topics on the table for folks to have real talk, to understand what the potential is, what the drawbacks are, and how to lean in to progress their organization as well as their own careers. So couldn't be more thrilled to be starting the series. I actually came up with a little bit of a fun exercise to kick us off as it pertains to AI. These things all kind of intersect with AI, the things that I'd like to talk about. And I'm going to put you both on the hot seat for a minute before we dive into kind of the framework of our discussion. But I'm going to make it difficult because you only can answer in one word. You cannot elaborate. So we're going to do a quick rapid fire. And I'm going to start with Tom. So Tom, one word answer. What comes first, brand or product?
Product.
Zain, what comes first, brand or product?
Product.
All right, we're going to flip the order this time. Zain, you're going to go first. Zain, will AI ever fully replace humans? Yes or no?
No.
Tom?
No.
Is content quantity more important than content quality? Tom, yes or no?
No.
Zain?
No.
Okay.
Zane just copies my answer.
No, he hasn't copied for everyone. He is not fully aligned to your scorecard. Okay. Is AI going to lead the future of content, or will it still be humans? Humans or AI leads the future of content? Zain?
AI.
Tom?
Humans.
Humans. All right. At least we have a split scorecard. That should lead us into an interesting conversation. So obviously, all the topics that I just mentioned are going to intersect with AI. Whether it's you're trying to build a brand, you're trying to build product, how AI can expedite those things or make it better. But maybe we'll take a step back. The lines between kind of selling, marketing, how buying decisions get made are blurring more and more every day. And AI is expediting sort of what is a marketing activity, what is a sales activity, what is a channel activity. And so maybe, Tom, I'll start with you. Like, how is AI today impacting all the go-to-market for organizations?
I mean, I think AI is a great tool in the hands of a smart marketer. I certainly can't imagine doing my job or having my team do their job without the benefits of AI. I certainly think we're a long ways away from AI automating big parts of the marketing, of the go-to-market function. But it's a very effective productivity tool. Think about this, how fast we can do research as an example. I can have AI read an account's annual report, come back to me with 5 takeaways, turn that into a really effective personalized sales email. Like stuff like that would have taken hours, and now it takes 10 minutes.
Yep. Tom, I love that. And even the research that you did for a seller, some of those insights can get plugged back into how you do account-based marketing and things that you can utilize for intent, right? And so I think that there's even just that one example of how it impacts sales, I think can cross over to marketing pretty quickly. Maybe I'll pass it to Zain. When you think about go-to-market in general for business leaders, how do you see AI impacting maybe even dotCMS and our go-to-market, or just general trends that you're seeing as a CEO?
Yeah, so for me, I think when I think about AI and adoption, we think about it in like three or maybe four pillars. For me, the first one is, how do you generate more content while maintaining brand consistency? I think that's the challenge. The second main pillar is governance. How do you make sure that you stay within the compliance metrics that organizations, especially large enterprises that we serve, have? And the third one is, again, how do you kick things forward, which is how do you hyper personalize for your audience? And that's where my earlier comment that AI might be producing most of the content in the future is when you set those parameters, then does the human actually need to oversight? But that's probably many years away. And then the last bit is maybe how do you like drive efficiency in like the smallest tasks, right? How can you use an AI to help you model in a CMS, for example, or generate more, content that might resonate with your particular audience, which I touched upon in personalization.
Yeah. See, and I love that. For me, one of the things I'm most excited about is like, even you talked about personalization and improving workflows around specifically a CMS, is this idea that things that we've been trying to solve for a long time. Personalization like has been on the tip of every digital marketer or digital seller's tongue for forever.
Since the mid 2000s.
Tom, you're dating yourself. So those challenges have existed for a long time that we've been trying to solve, and we made incremental progress. But if you ask a consumer what their experience is, and if it's materially different than it was even a few years ago, I would guess you get a mixed reaction. And I think AI has the opportunity to improve some of the age-old challenges that we've been trying to solve for, whether it's improving sales productivity, personalization, how content gets live quicker, how you map content to every stage of the buyer journey. Like those are all things that have been massive undertakings for marketers and business leaders that I think AI can help expedite. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is if you played with any kind of generative AI tool, you can see how quickly you can get a vast amount of content out about a bunch of different topics. And so this idea that the market is going to get flooded with content is something that I think we all need to be thinking about. And at the same time, there's going to be a gravitation towards brands that can deliver consistency and authenticity. And so this idea of brand consistency, maybe we'll start with that just as a concept, Tom, because I think it's going to be a really important one in the age of AI. And then we'll talk about, how AI impacts it. So maybe Tom, what does brand consistency mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of Nike, I think of Coca-Cola, I think of Apple. These iconic brands essentially have stood for the same thing for decades, and the way they communicate has stayed the same with decades or for decades. I worry a lot about AI. Like there's zero way that a company like Apple would use AI to generate its brand voice and its narrative. Like there's zero chance, right? So AI might seem like a shortcut for marketers, but when something is so important as how you communicate your brand to the world, I don't think AI has a role in that. I honestly don't. So I think the big challenge right now is that there's this tension between I want to work faster and AI can do things for me and I want to cheat code, but I don't think you get to the top by cheating. I think that's where I think humans ultimately are going to continue to win. AI is not the answer for how it may be the answer for how you scale your brand, but it certainly isn't the answer for how you define your brand.
Okay, so I was about to disagree with you until your last statement. So let's talk through that a bit, because you have gone on the record of saying, uh, and help me here, Tom, because it's once you said it internally a few times and people start to understand it, then you publish it externally. What is that narrative that you talk about around, staying spot on with a message? What?
Here's here's a simple framework I use as a marketer.
Yep,
So we get bored of messages way too quickly. And I think, again, companies like Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola don't, right?
yep,
They might use different words to describe it, but it's the same essential narrative. So here's my simple framework. By the time marketing gets sick of something is about when sales are just starting to get it. By the time sales get sick of something is just about when the market's starting to get it. And by the time the market is sick of something, you've done your job,
yep.
right? So is the market sick of Coca-Cola narratives or Apple narratives or Nike narratives? Maybe, but heck, as a marketer, that's what you want. I think the biggest path to failure as a marketer is moving on too quickly. And again, I think this is where AI can create problems for you.
Yeah, I agree, Tom, which is the unique consistency in that narrative. Even if you look at something, I'm gonna go off on tangent, Save Money, Live Better by Walmart. That lived in the market for years and years and years before it resonated. Now, the question for me is the variations of that get personalized for, the 100 different cohorts of folks who shop at a brand like Nike. One's a runner, one's a basketball player, one like, can AI support the deviations of the brand narrative that are going to make it feel more personalized? That's where I
Yeah.
think there's the opportunity. But Zain, I wanted to pass to you. I mean, we have many customers that you talk to on a regular basis, and brand consistency is something that's come up. I'm just curious, how would you define brand consistency?
I think my interaction with AI generated content, I would say, I think it's less with brands in this state today. I think it's more with we could like on social media. I think on LinkedIn, for example, it's now flushed with people who are doing thought leadership, and it's pretty obvious that people are using AI a lot. So for me, when I think about consistency, again, it's hard for you to generate content through AI on a consistent basis and have the same tone of voice as Tom alluded to. But then there's another layer of authenticity, which AI probably can never replicate. So I think that might take us into the next topic that I was touching upon earlier, which is the governance. Whether or not you make it explicit, whether this is AI generated content or not. But yeah, that's my conception at this point.
Yeah, no, that's great, Zain. Maybe before we go on to compliance and sort of governance of content, one thing I did want to ask both of you, just in terms of predictions, with the accessibility to AI tools, what should the marketing leaders expect in terms of the volume of content output that they need to account for, to plan to review? There's this notion that now with AI, that you're going to have a new pool of writers within your organization who want to contribute. What's your prediction for marketers on what's coming, and any thoughts on how they should manage it? Because that ties right back into brand consistency.
There have been some success stories with people who have churned out low quality content using AI from an SEO perspective. So there are success stories, and maybe early adopters might benefit from some of that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with traditional organic search as search engines like Google move to using AI to deliver search results versus the way we've been doing it for a couple of decades. That's going to be super interesting. I don't think and to Zane's point about social media, we've seen the bad side of this. I don't think AI, again, is a cheat code for churning out lots and lots of volume of content. What it is a cheat code for is ideation. It's a cheat code for tone of voice. You can train AI on your brand voice and help you stay consistent. That's a great use of AI. AI is awful at creating stuff from scratch. AI is pretty great at summarization use cases and sort of taking a training set of documents about your brand voice and helping you rewrite things. Like, that's a great use case for it. So I think AI isn't so much about quantity, it's about quality. I think you can produce better content with AI. I don't think you want to be trying to create more content. More is almost never the right answer.
Yeah, and that's why things like especially workflows within how you think about content are going to be critical as you and content analytics, right? You are going to have that increase in volume, like you talked about, Tom, in some cases with the variation, but also the authenticity, which should reflect in the analytics if
Yeah.
you're training the AI models properly. So content
Yeah.
analytics will be something that's going to be it's going to be more and more important as you train your AI models. The training should match the impact on the content, right?
Content analytics is an incredible, all of a sudden now in my mind has become incredibly important. The traditional web analytics have failed us.
Yep.
And I think they're going to continue to fail us. I love the idea as a marketer. If I know what content is working and the business impact it's delivering, huge value to me.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, and so that's that. Obviously, that's one half of the equation, which is optimization of content in the age of AI. The other thing is the compliance around the content, which Zane started to talk about. I mean, there is legislation that's in progress. That's specifically around notating what content is was created through generative AI versus what hasn't been. And so, I guess maybe the bigger question is how does AI how's it going to change compliance requirements and the work and the sort of
Hmm.
all of the nuances that go into compliance as we know today?
Well, I got a lot. Sorry, Zane. I got a lot of opinions on this one. So the biggest issue in AI right now is how models are trained, right? So you're starting to see, so OpenAI and the initial models just essentially trained itself on the internet, including scraping the content of creators who maybe didn't want OpenAI to be training its model on their content, right? Especially in the case of publishers like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Reddit, et cetera, who their entire value is in this content that's been scraped. So you're starting to see now OpenAI and others have to license content, which is wildly expensive for those that do it. You have Apple, who's trying to do their new Apple Intelligence by licensing content and doing it the right way. But like, there's so little transparency behind these models. It is going to be a compliance nightmare. And there will be successful lawsuits for companies who say that, you know, your model stole my content, therefore I'm entitled to some damages, right? That is absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, and so what you're saying there, Tom, is the risk is not just on the folks who are writing the models. The risk is also on the company who has utilized that content for commercial purposes to try to grow their business, and that the
Yeah.
risk is dual. And so, Zane, I see you ready to jump in here, so I think you're equally passionate to Tom on this. I'll let you chime in too.
Yeah, no, I think to your point, there absolutely has to be a human intervention, in the whole content lifecycle. And I think the importance of workflows and audit trails will become more important than ever. With new legislation, as you said, there's parts of the world where, in Europe, for example, I think
Yeah.
we will see a far more aggressive crackdown on, this plagiarized, so to speak, content being used in places where you don't intend it to be. So yeah, I think we're still in a mode at this point where enterprise, especially, I mean, we serve large enterprises. I think people will be super cautious in what kind of content they're using and where it shows up also.
Yeah.
100%. I think the importance of where your content lives. And again, we obviously have customers using us as their content repository. And then if we can build tools that can make their life easier in terms of highlighting where the content comes from,
Yeah.
then I think it just will help the managers to make sure that this remain compliant. And that is why one of the things that we're doing at dotCMS is making sure that the content is generated not outside in a separate window at ChatGPT, but once you're using it, doing it within the platform, even if you're using ChatGPT, then at least you can tag it right there and then that, you know what, this was AI generated. And if we can automate that, I think that's probably going to help our users far more than anybody else, anything else.
Totally agree. No, I think the content management system as the system of record for, as the single source of truth for content, regardless of where it goes, becomes more important than ever. And to Zane's point, the ability to tag, and it's funny, like this content management thing, which I've been doing for a long time, it always comes back to the same concepts, right? How do we empower people to create better quality content faster? How do we have the ability to classify that content in a way so that we can quickly come back and find it and search on it and run reports on it? These are all topics we've been thinking about for 20 years. And it's good to hear dotCMS thinking about there are obviously lots of really fancy things we can think about around how content's delivered and all of that. But a lot of the production side of the content workflow is become super important now. And I think that's where the next 10 years of differentiation are going to happen in the CMS market. It's going to be on the authoring side, the back end side, more so than even the front end side.
Yeah, Tom, what we hold this vantage point that content has to be a team sport, and that ties directly into what we believe of universal CMS, having all these personas, whether it's compliance, marketing, IT wants to deliver in various fashions, they have to come together versus this tools built for a specific group. But I want to pull us out a little bit from that. What I heard from both of you is when you think about the content lifecycle today, compliance definitely played a role, right? They kind of came in at a certain juncture and ensured that the content you were about to push live was on track. And then they had an audit trail for that content. In the context of AI, how does the content lifecycle change and the importance of compliance throughout that content lifecycle?
Goes back to the point I made a few minutes ago. The authoring process, the process of creating, content, whatever that content is, video, text, images, whatever. There are way more implications than there used to be on just basic processes. Who signs off on what? Does legal have to sign off on content? For a lot of people, yes. So now having workflows that you can put in place that let that happen are super important. Being able to make sure that what you're putting out into market is going to help in your brand. That becomes super important because it's really easy for someone to churn out low quality content that might not be what Apple, the world's best brands, want to put out. So I think it goes back to the sort of basic building blocks of a CMS become incredibly important now in the world of AI. And I think this is going to be the next 10 years of innovation in the CMS space.
Yeah, Tom, so what I heard you say, and make sure I'm capturing correctly, when you think about compliance, you're thinking about almost legal or financial implications around compliance as well as brand implications around compliance. Legal financial would be on sort of the documentation, the declaration of what's AI and what's not. And on the brand side of things, it's about pushing content that might be written by AI that doesn't fit within the brand standards. So it sounds like there's depth in terms of the compliance needs that are just kind of starting to get surfaced as organizations are utilizing AI as part of their content
Agreed.
journey. So you both have alluded to it, and obviously we have a bit of a bias, but you've talked about the tech stack that's going to enable both brand consistency and compliance. I'd love to hear just your general perspective. Obviously, a CMS is part of it, why it's so important, and what other technology is going to be important.
Ryan, I've been a CMS guy for 20 years, so you know what my answer is going to be. But I genuinely believe that more so now than ever, the CMS is the traffic cop for these AI initiatives. Think about, you talked about personalization. The biggest problem with personalization has always been, we want to do these sophisticated multivariate tests that require dozens of assets. Well, now AI can help us generate those. Think about images. I can scale out dozens of images quickly now with AI. I could never do that before, but I want to have governance, compliance, legal review, all the things we just talked about in place before I go do that. CMS helps me do that. So the CMS is going to be the traffic cop for AI content production, and it's going to know things about where the content's delivered, what variation was used here, was it created with AI or not, right? The CMS is going to be one of the, not the only, but one of the platform elements you're going to have going forward in this, how do we use AI strategy at enterprises?
Yeah, Tom, I love the traffic cop terminology, and I think it's a good place because at some point this all needs to come to a head. Both the workflows, the analytics, how everything is getting delivered. So
Yeah, just maybe again, we service a big, I guess, fraction of our customer base is compliance oriented industries. We have a ton of financial services, and we have some of the largest healthcare companies in the world. And again, we can talk about consumer brands and tone of voice, but when you talk healthcare, you can understand how important it is not for somebody to be generating ChatGPT hallucination-based content and then putting it out on the website as treatment plans, right? So one other thing on top of the workflows that we do think about is permissions, and we haven't talked about that. But who can use AI, right? Who should
Yep.
be allowed? What kind of content can be created or should not be created? Again, those are all some of the guardrails that absolutely probably can live only in the CMS, where people are even like creating, editing, publishing content.
Yep. Goes back to this is one of these basic building blocks that now becomes super important. So, and I think these are the building blocks that often get ignored when people are looking at content management platforms. They don't look at these core building blocks. Back to your healthcare example, if you're a pharmaceutical company and you use ChatGPT to churn out some content, that might not be accurate, and the FDA might come after you the minute after you publish something. You can't do that. So permissions, governance, workflow, all of those things that no one talks about, super important in AI. You cannot deploy AI actually without those processes being in place.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing for me there, guys, is that there's the real opportunity is, like I talked about earlier, is taking some of these age-old challenges and bringing them to a new place with AI. Right. And so how do we do that with things like personalization if we don't have the governance rules first? Right. So that to me is, if I was thinking about the steps to get to AI, what has come across from both of you is the foundation needs to be laid. And there's a lot of considerations around the foundation. But, when you think about personalized experiences, we've talked about sort of the drawbacks and the scary parts, for lack of a better term, around personalization, content that's off brand, to people who are contributing who don't have the right information. How does AI improve personalized experiences in your mind? And let's say in the short term.
So I think the problem with personalization, I used to call this the Hannah Montana problem, which is I remember a long time ago, I'd go on Amazon, I was shopping for my niece, I bought some Hannah Montana products, and for the next 10 years, all Amazon thought I cared about was Hannah Montana, because the algorithms that are used to personalize content to you, even to this day on places like Amazon, are pretty unsophisticated. They essentially assume the last thing that you looked at was the thing that you'll always be interested in. And that is obviously not the reality of the world. I think AI and algorithms in general can do a much better job at giving you the right thing for you. But that's where it comes back to, it turns into a content production problem, which is now how do I get, if I can personalize to all these people one-to-one, the permutations of content and images and messages become unmanageable. AI can help with the caveat of governance, approval, workflow, all the things we just talked about. I think both from an algorithm perspective and AI's ability to help you scale content, I think we can do personalization right for the first time. The state of the art of personalization is pretty unsophisticated, honestly.
Yep, I'd agree. I've got a bunch of comments and thoughts on it, but Zain, I want to pass to you. How does AI help scale personalization? What are the benefits you think we're going to see from AI as it pertains to personalization here in the near future?
I would, my perspective is basically from a content management perspective, at least. Obviously, not a marketing expert here like Tom, but I think about it. How can we boost efficiency for people who are solving these challenges, right? How can we help them do content modeling better? How can we improve search? Companies are decades years old, and people have been creating content for years and years, and a new marketer comes in and produces a ton of content, and the previous one gets forgotten. So just maybe, how can we improve your chat? How can we improve your translation? Maybe we can enable prompt management within the system, so there's a tracker and people know, what the guardrails are. So for me, personalization is a productivity boost slash efficiency problem. While obviously, to Tom's point, there's a lot of things as far as the quality of the data and the algorithm that you build on top of that data. There's massive opportunity there as well.
Great.
Yeah, I like what both of you guys said in different flavors. Tom, this idea of, like, going back to there needs to be the right permissions. And how do you start with someone who can really take advantage of the AI models for maybe a specific area of the business? And Zain, same thing with you. You were talking about language translation. Maybe there's someone who's responsible for translating. I mean, most global brands have barely figured out how to translate the foundational content for their site and make it accessible in other languages in a way that the message resonates across. So whether it's a line of business and utilizing those models and putting guardrails around the variations of content and having someone assigned to that, or finding a use case like translation to scale personalization, I think is a great starting point. But when you think about the most impactful area that AI is going to drive value in the content lifecycle, say in the next 12 months, where do you think it's going to be?
Next 12 months. I don't know that much changes in the next 12 months.
Mm.
I don't know that much changes. We're not ready for it. Like, we are not ready for it. Having a bunch of people install the ChatGPT app on their desktop or use Apple Intelligence to start churning out a bunch of content does not solve enterprise problems. We have a governance problem. We have lawyers who want to be in the mix. We're not ready to deploy AI in a wide scale way, right? So I think we're in a experimentation phase. We will see some successes. We will see some failures. But my encouragement would be, don't focus on AI at this point. Focus on governance, focus on content modeling, focus on workflows, focus on permissions, all the things that you're going to need to do before you ever think about going big with AI.
Okay, Tom. So let's say that they're in the process and they feel like they've got a good grasp. They've started to get a good grasp around their governance and workflows. Where do you think some of the experimentation is going to happen that we could see success? Is it going to be there's a model on how to do this. There's a blueprint on terms of how to go to market with all the teams, compliance, legal, or is there something you're going to see after that?
I think there's two quick wins that I focus on. I think sort of training models on your brand voice, and almost every with all of the consumer models, and then there are some third-party products out there. You can essentially train models on your brand voice, your tone, your style, all of that, using that as a way to make sure that what you do put out into the world is reasonably consistent. Very cool use case. Again, not writing something from scratch, but making sure that what every marketer produces is consistent with the language that you want to use as an organization. That's a great use case. I think image production for multivariate testing or A/B testing is a really great use case. Put something together, give it to ChatGPT and say, create me 3 variations. That's a cool use case. I think they're more experimentation, but I like the idea of starting with, hey, how can AI help me make sure I've got brand voice consistency across all my digital channels, social media, website, etc. Very low impact, high reward place to start.
I love that first one because here's the reason why. At dotCMS, one of the things that we see, we work with a lot of multi-brand organizations, multi-business unit organizations, and the consistency across those organizations is very difficult to nail down, especially in digital channels, right? So every brand is going to have its own flavor. It's going to have its own look and feel in some capacity, but there are things that are going to be true and consistent across a portfolio of brands. And to train an AI model on how to capture that consistency as well as the specificity of a brand is very, very complicated. And I think an AI model would be a great place to start. How about you? Where do you think AI is going to provide the most value in the content lifecycle here in the next 12 months?
Yeah, no, I'm with Tom 100%. I think it is probably going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of journey. I think some of the lawsuits that Tom alluded to earlier will conclude and will scare some people, where they will become maybe a little more cautious even on how quickly they adopt. But that said, I think the pace of adoption will absolutely be determined by some of the things that we talked about, right? Whether the technology has governance and consistency and authenticity at the heart of it, and whether people who are in these, most large enterprises will have some sort of compliance associated with it. So I think that focus would probably drive adoption as far as content lifecycle goes.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Zain. Okay, so I know we've talked about quite a few different topics, Zain. Maybe for our listeners, it might be good for them to just hear a quick synopsis on how we're thinking about AI here at dotCMS, and as we evolve our offering, where we think the market is going and what's important to us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we're thinking about it in three main pillars. First and foremost is how do we help teams, maintain a brand consistency? How can we introduce, guardrails across the platform? And then last is, how can we boost productivity and efficiency, whether that's producing content at scale within the guardrails that I alluded to earlier, or helping with better personalization tools, search tools. And then we kind of tie it into back to the idea of a universal CMS, which Ryan, you alluded to earlier, which is basically content is a team sport. You need content teams and an entire persona that we missed. We shouldn't have, probably because Tom comes from an engineering background himself, are the engineers, which again is
Yeah.
probably a big impact area. AI is better at producing code than content at this point.
That's what I was
Um,
going to say, Zain. You're entirely right. That is an actual, real good point. AI is better at producing code. And you think about the challenges of front end development and how expensive it can be. There is huge value to be realized on the front end with AI. To your point, that's closer to reality than it is on the content authoring side, for sure.
Correct. And again, we have developers and content creators and DevOps people in the platform too, right? So there's definitely a big impact area for code generation.
Awesome. Awesome. Tom, Zain, we've talked about a lot of topics today where AI can have a tremendous impact for marketing and business leaders. Many of them today are like, how do I start to take action? What are the things I need to do in order to implement some of these different tactics where AI is going to have an impact? If you were to give them advice in terms of what they should do leaving this call so they can take action on any of the things that we talked about today, what would it be? Tom, I'll start with you.
So I've got a couple of pieces of advice. First, I'm an Apple guy. So Apple is pretty close to releasing Apple Intelligence, which is going to give you some very simple AI writing tools that you can use in any CMS, in any document authoring tool. Like, it's just going to help you write more effectively. I use Grammarly to do that today. These are things that they're not creating content. It's simply about how do you write better. Whether you're using dotCMS or putting stuff into a Google Doc, I think some of those simple tools that are essentially free or very, very low cost are a great way to start. And this is something I know that dotCMS is working on as well.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I think those are great entry points. How about you, Zain? What advice would you give to a marketing leader who is wanting to take the first steps to utilize any of the AI techniques or ideas that we talked about today?
Yeah, so my perspective is slightly different, thinking from a perspective of, maybe a C-suite in a large enterprise. So I think it might be a good exercise to really look at the content lifecycle within your organization and highlight the surface area of risk, where all the organization might be exposed to such adoption, and then just revisiting whether your technology is ready to put those guardrails in place, and if it's not, then that's the direction you would need to take in terms of really understanding which technology would make sure that you can adopt AI without exposing yourself to too much risk.
Yeah, I love it, Zain. Essentially, if you did want to implement those things, do you have the right compliance workflows, all the things that are needed in order to be able to
Yeah.
actually take action and use some of the tools even that Tom mentioned, or
Yeah.
would it expose risk for the business? So I know we're at time. Tom, always great to have you. Zain, thank you so much for the insight you provided for our audience. For those listening in, thanks for joining the first episode of Real Talk, Real Trust with dotCMS, and we'll see you on the next one.